Good evening, everybody out there. This is Noreen McClendon with Free to Heal, and we're back again for another session to try to handle and overcome the ravages and scars and wounds of mass incarceration with formerly incarcerated family members, children, any stakeholder, anybody touched by the criminal justice system. And I have a gentleman who wants to say something before we get started.
You know, the guy who was saying, tell the truth and all that.
And let me just make sure you understand the context. It was when you go on a job interview and they ask the question, have you ever been convicted, that you tell the truth. I just want to make sure that the people listening know what it is, so that when you say what you say, that it helps.
Most of the time when you tell somebody you killed one or two people, the chances of you getting that job is slim and none. You know, that's why I say, and I picked that up from Sister Teresa about telling them no, because most of the average people, when you say you killed somebody or more than one person, they want to get so damn far away from you that you don't have a fair chance. You know, it ain't who you are now. They're going by who you were when you killed somebody.
And also on paper. But let me tell you what I'm sure the answer to the question.
I want to say something too, Noreen, before after you get done.
Well, go ahead and say what you're gonna say, and then I'll say what I gotta say.
Well, I want to just say this. I don't know how long it's been since my man had been on a job interview. You know,
are you saying I'm old?
I'm saying you might be misinformed about the situation, because they can't even ask you if you've been to jail anymore. I mean, they can do background checks after the fact, but if they ask you if you've been to jail or anything about that, you can actually sue now. That's something that they can't even do that now. So and of course, once they find out what it is, you might not get selected. You know, you might get discharged from wherever it is, but you can't even really think about that type of negative energy when you're going forward in your life. It happens. You know what I mean? But they don't even ask you that anymore. And if they do, you can definitely sue them. So let me say that just to be known for the people.
There's a couple things that I want to say. Number one, normally the question was that you would be answering no to, that I'm sure is what Sister Teresa was saying to you, was, have you been convicted of a felony in the last 7 years? Normally that was the question. There are certain kinds of employers. I know the city of LA, the county of LA, and I think the state of California, those employers and several others have taken the question off of their application, but it still becomes a part of their background check. Technically, they're not supposed to go back further than 10 years, but they do. And I know James just went through this. And so they find whatever it is, which is why the advice to tell the truth, which is what Rufus did, is actually in your best interest. If the employer is going to be felon friendly, and it almost doesn't matter what the crime is, believe it or not, if they're going to be felon friendly, they're going to be felon friendly, and they're going to do what they gave Rufus an opportunity to do, which is to explain the circumstances, explain what things he did to rehabilitate himself. And I'm going to say this, I'm a big believer in telling the truth, because otherwise we're still dealing in criminality. Lying, all of that's all on a slippery slope. You tell one lie, you got to tell another lie. Either we about this life or we're not. And anybody because I know we had another guy who came and he got hired, and then they went back in his background further and they let him go. But again, there are employers, and for example, I did a program with the Department of Water and Power, and they were willing to overlook a lot of background, but the one thing they would not forgive under any circumstances is if you lied on the application. If you told a lie, that was automatic disqualification. That's why they asked them to get their the sheets, get their rap sheets, and make sure that they didn't leave anything off. Because, you know, if you live in a life, sometimes you might forget about that one time they took you in and let you go, right? But they wanted to know everything. And so we had several people that were hired with them with backgrounds, but the issue became, if you lie, you really put yourself out of it. Because what it does for them is it solidifies somehow that you still don't get it. You still a criminal, and you wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Right, and that is the HR term is falsification of records.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what that does, Mr. Ring, that takes away your credibility.
Absolutely.
Right.
It absolutely takes it diminishes your credibility, and anything that you would say from there saying, well, I'm reformed, it just makes it less believable.
Well, what happened if they?
But wait, go ahead. But wait, Pike, let him finish, and then you can ask your question.
I want y'all to understand something. Any train company is federal. They don't have a statute. And a lot of companies, what they're doing is they're not asking you. What they're doing now are credit checks. And credit checks show where you last lived and the time before that. And from that, your case and your everything pops up on that. So now, I talked to 2 attorneys I've been dealing with behind my case. And what they told me is this: we all have not been convicted in the last 7 to 10 years. True, true. The thing is, you mark no and you go to explanation. Because we have not been off parole longer than 5 to 7 years, that helps them do a background check. It's not because of the conviction, it's because of the time that we've done, and we haven't been off parole longer than 5 to 7 years. I went to exoneration thing in Watts a couple of days ago. Well, Saturday, I believe. And when I went to that, the lady told me, she said, how long you been out? I said, 3 years. She said, no, for your case, you have to have 10 years clean before you can even think about having your case exonerated. So when you think about that, think about this. When you fill out your application, no, you haven't been convicted of a crime in the last 5 to 7 to 10 years, but put no and put explanation. I did just get off parole at such and such date. So what you're doing is you're beating the credibility. This is what the attorneys is telling me. You're beating the credibility aspect of it because you are being truthful. The fact that I was convicted in 95, but I just got off parole 2021. So I only have 2 to 3 years off parole. So I have to now write, no, I haven't been convicted. But in the explanation point, I say, but I just got off parole at this date, because all of our driver's license, and think about this too, all of our driver's licenses are new. None of us have a driver's license older than a year or 2. So that right there raises a red flag. That itself is going to raise a red flag. You 40, 50 years old, why you just get a driver's license a year or 2 ago? That's another red flag. So that's why the attorney has been schooling me on how to do it. And I'm telling y'all what the legal beagles that actually fought with this case actually tell me now to do. And my cousin used to be HR for the airports. She said, we hire felons, but you put on there you wasn't convicted at this time, but in the explanation, right, you just got off parole. So that's your credibility into where the airports is. So you're not lying, technically.
Awesome. And you wanted to say something, Pike?
Yeah, they asked me, well, how many robberies I've done.
Thank you.
Who the fuck can remember as many robberies as I've done? I mean, it used to be like going to work.
That was your
Every
work, but thank
Thursday
goodness,
or Friday.
like Terrell said, thankfully you're not even applying for no jobs, okay? Because he's still trying to get checks from us. Remember, he come on here every week and ask which one of us got a check for him. So we ain't listening to him. We ain't gonna worry about it.
Shit, I'm
Right.
Larry,
put one in for your
cash.
company too.
Anyway, y'all. So
Check
listen,
it.
so
Larry,
hey,
hold on.
yes.
Let me say something that quick.
Go ahead, sweetie.
When I was at San Quentin, I was in LA projects, and we had groups on this job thing that y'all discussing right now. And the thing is, if they ask you, have you been convicted in the last 7 years, and you say no, you're being truthful. It's the wording of the question. As long as you're being truthful, you're gonna say I haven't been convicted in the last 7 years. And then once you get the job and they fire you later on, now that's discrimination. Now you can sue them, like the other gentleman was saying. You can sue them. As long as your crime has nothing to do with that job, say they hired me in the bank. They find out I've been convicted for robbery, robbing banks and robbing this, robbing stuff like that. Now I can't have the job. But as long as my crime have nothing to do with that job, I could sue them. And I'd rather go ahead and get that job and let them fire me and sue their ass. I'm still getting paid because of their discrimination against me.
You know, let me tell you. Hold on. Let me say this though. Discrimination is extremely difficult to prove. Just letting you go after you've been there, particularly if they let you go. Wait 1 second. If they let you go in your probationary period. If they let you get past your 90-day probationary period, it might be something, but usually they will come back before that 90 days is up and let you go. Once they have gone back, I
made it to 89
days. 89, and I'm telling you that right before that 90 days, and they let them go. So again, there are various ways, and I understand, and the notion to sue to say that this was discrimination is very difficult to prove. It's very difficult, but I wanted you to finish your point.
Okay, now, like I was saying, they got an organization that help us on things like that they do all the work as far as suing, so we don't have to worry about going through all these trials and tribulations that they might put us through. Now, I have all the information on this right here. So, like I say, it's discrimination either way it goes. That's why in certain prisons, they took the CDC off the prison codes because of how it discriminates against us from rehabilitating ourselves and become a better person for society. But, I ain't got all the answers to all the questions, but like the other young guy was saying a minute ago about suing them, he is so right about that. Because we can sue them if we find the right people to help us to see what we're trying to do in life like that. And like I say, it's about information, contacting certain people to get this done. And that's why you got certain businesses hire convicts because the state pays them to hire us. They get some kind of tax break for them hiring us and stuff like that. Now, like I say, if you commit a certain kind of crime and you're in a certain kind of job that has something to do with your crime, you cannot get that job. They won't allow you to have that job. But other jobs, yes, you can get them. And like I say, you tell the truth, just like you say. If I ain't been convicted of a felony in 7 years, I'm being truthful. I haven't been convicted of a felony in 7 years. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, yeah. But, like I say,
one thing I would ask you to do is if you said there's an organization that will help, if you have that information, certainly please share it. I'm not asking you to look it up right this moment, but please, for the benefit of anybody that's on now or anybody that may listen to this, if you have the information or the contact person for that organization that will help us, by all means,
I'm bring it to you.
I'm going to go and let
I'm gonna bring it to you.
But then share it with us, okay?
Okay, I'm gonna bring you this information, paperwork on that.
Okay.
All right. Hey, Miss Maureen.
Wait 1 second. I gotta let Pike say what he was gonna say, because y'all know he always accused me of never letting him talk. Never mind, he done talked 5 times tonight, y'all, and we ain't been on here. But hold on.
All right.
One thing, and I ain't trying to be funny, but you can always say you work for the Department of Correction, because I worked 35 years before I got to where I couldn't physically work no more. And I got paid those 35 years. I didn't get much, but I still worked for the Department of Correction as a plumber.
And I actually have heard that recommended by people too. Kit, you was going to say something else?
Okay, the whole point of this subject was this. Okay, I tell people to tell the truth. I have been convicted of 3 murders.
Mhm.
I've always told the truth when I was asked, have I been convicted of murder?
Mhm.
I've been hired by some of the best companies in Los Angeles. I've been given a chance because I proved without a doubt I'm a reformed criminal. And I've been proven. There's a company called Urban Academy that hard to hire convicts. They gave me my footstone and showed me that no matter what your past is, you can move past that. And once you get a job history pass, you can move from that job to another job, to a better job.
Mhm.
If you always tell the truth, they cannot fire you later on down the line saying we found this in your past because you already exposed your past. Believe this here. Your past will come up and you got to stand up and face it.
Mhm.
Don't believe that nobody ever going to see you and say, I don't know you. People walking down the street, I don't even remember me.
You that
So
kind of guy,
always
Kid?
know that.
You that kind of guy, Kid? You memorable? That's what you're trying to say, Kid? No.
What I'm trying to
No, but
tell
it's true.
you is,
No, but you're right though. Listen,
you
all
could be
jokes
walking with
aside,
your
Kid, you're
boss.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You know, I was born and raised in a whole nother state, right? But I can tell you, there's almost nowhere I can go in this town and don't run into somebody that I know. One of the things that I always say is you are going to follow you everywhere you go. It's one of the reasons why it is important to be who you say you are. One of my experiences was, and I might have said this to you guys before, I managed little league football teams for a lot of years, and then I started doing hardcore gang intervention. And at a funeral, both of those worlds collided, meaning I went to a funeral of a mother who was a mother from one of the football, the families that played football. And as it turned out, her children were also very much heavily gang involved, and they were one of them families in their hood. So all of these people coming together, and if I had a bad jacket on either side, it would have killed my ability to work in either one. So you never know when where you have been is going to come together with where you are right now. And I'm just a big believer. One of the things I found for myself, even though I've never been to prison, is I make out much better when I stand on the truth.
No matter what.
Standing on the truth has saved me lots and lots of times. Another thing about it is I don't have to remember what story I told. So that's another thing. But this is what I want to talk to you about tonight. It's another one of those subjects. And I'm going to give you, the word is vulnerable. Capable of being physically or emotionally wounded. Open to attack or damage. Liable to increased penalties, but entitled to increased bonuses after winning a game. That's another one. But the ones that, the first 2 definitions, capable of being physically or emotionally wounded and open to attack or damage. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to start off giving you guys an opportunity to discuss some questions that I had about being vulnerable, because in prison, being vulnerable takes on a lot of different forms. And I wanted you guys to talk first to me, because Pike said I talk too much. I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to talk about in prison, what were ways that you were vulnerable and things that the definition of that while you were in prison. And again, this is open for conversation for everybody, please just chime in and get in where you fit in.
Yeah, Miss Lorraine, I would like to start. This happened in 2014 at San Quentin State Prison. I used to have a PET machine, a PCAP, and it made noise. And one night, I fell asleep under this PET machine. I had a cellie that moved in with me about 3 or 4 days prior to this incident. As I was sleeping, he got down off of his bunk and he attacked me while I was asleep. And I thought it was a dream at first. But when I started coming out of the sleep, he had already swollen my face. He had hit me with a hot pot, and the side of my head was swollen. And when I got up off of the rack, I pushed him back. And so the guard had just passed. And at that very moment, after he did that, attacked me, he got up in his rack and went to sleep. I got up and started boiling water. I was going to throw this hot water on him. But something told me 2 wrongs don't make a right. So I waited to daybreak and I reported it. I had an incident and I need to see a doctor. And they asked me what had happened. I began to explain after they had took pictures of my swollen eye and my head, what had went on. So I told them I had just got a new cellmate and I no longer want to be in the cell with this man because of what had happened. Well, at that point, they either do one or 2 things. They separate you or they'll ask you to sign a marriage. A marriage is where you want to retaliate against someone doing something to you. Yeah. They didn't do any of those things. And so they wind up separating us. Well, it went on about 3 weeks after that had happened. The guy that attacked me while I was sleeping wanted my apology. He wanted my forgiveness for what he had done. I thought about that, and I said, I can't be angry enough to forgive this guy for what he had done. Although my better self said, no, get him back. You're in the joint. And when it got out that this had happened and you didn't do anything about it, they think that you are weak. Then you become very vulnerable. And I carried that on for years and years and years. Well, there was a group of guys that I had befriended, and we had been doing things together, working and things like that in prison. They wanted to help me do something to this guy. But I told them, I said, no, we're not going to do anything to this guy, because at the time he felt really remorse. And he spoke to me in front of them because they were ready to do something along with myself. And so I said to myself, it's better to forgive than forget. But I went on and I shook the guy's hand, and that was behind me. And from that day to this day, I am very careful about being locked up in an area with somebody. But after that incident, I got single cell status, and I didn't have to worry about no one being in the cell with me anymore. And that was one of the better things that came out of this. I have a tendency to believe God had ways to work out every situation. And I'm a true, firm believer that in God's will, things will be better. And I took that as a bill of salt. But my mind was to throw this hot boiling water on this man. But I would have created a problem for myself. And
Absolutely,
I did.
you would have. Absolutely, you would have. And I'll tell you something. It took a lot more strength and a lot more courage to not retaliate than it would have to actually have done that. In addition to the fact that it could have caused you to have another sentence, another case for having done that. I see. Okay, neighborhood legal service, but Terrell, you had your hand up.
Well, I was just actually going to say just basically speak on those two entities that I just put it in the chat. Los Angeles Legal Aid Foundation and the Neighborhood Services for Legal Aid. Those are two nonprofits that will help anybody, especially people coming out of jail and in reentry, with any legal issue. And if you have anybody that discriminate against you, contact them people. Because they don't mind suing. They don't mind going after people. You know what I mean? That's what they do. You know, and it happens out here. And, you know, a lot of people be scared. I ain't gonna say nothing, I'm just gonna let it pass. No, don't let it pass. Because even if it don't help you, it's gonna help the next person. And it's gonna tell them people they can't just keep doing that to people. You know what I'm saying? So
Awesome.
So
okay.
So you know you gotta fight for your rights when you're out here. But that's what it is. And I did the same thing with the CO. I was about to scold that CO with some hot water and baby oil, and my homeboy from Grape Street was like, "No, man, don't do that, don't do that," because he took my food out the microwave, and we got into it, you know. And he was a punk ass CO in the feds. He was one of the Doom Squad people. He thought he was tough, and we had got into it before he had went through my mail. And this time he had took my food out the microwave, took my bowl out the microwave. So I was finna douse his ass with that hot baby oil and water and give him a whole new face. But my homeboy's like, "No, man, don't do that, don't do that." And lo and behold, he ended up, the same person that stopped me ended up hitting another CO across the head with the bottom of a mic stand and going to 88.
And before I go to Pike, one of the things I want to say, Mr. Steffens, about your story and your statement is that because that was part of another one of my questions about the potential consequences of being vulnerable in prison. So one of the potential consequences of you not retaliating would be that people may consider you weak, and now you become a target and you become more vulnerable because you didn't retaliate. But again, when you put it in the big picture and you look at what happened, you wound up in a situation where had you poured that water on, had you scalded him with that water, they never would have put you in a single cell status. Right? So then however long that lasted from that point until you came home, you had single cell status. And so that is something you likely would not have received had you retaliated. And again, I can tell you from experience, it is so much harder not to retaliate when somebody does you wrong and you know that they've done you wrong. It's so much harder. But you wanted to say something, Pike?
Yeah, I don't like I mean, that was a good story you were saying, but I had a cellie one time. He was pretty good size. And he told me one day he was gonna creep on me. And I told him straight up, I said, "Yeah, you can get away with that." But I said, "I got a extension cord down here, and I'm damn sure I can hold that long enough around your fucking neck till you croak, you know." Fuck all that, where somebody hurt you and think for some reason they can get away with it. I'm not the baddest motherfucker, never claimed to be the baddest, but I'm the most revengeful son of a bitch you will ever know.
Well, and one thing about that though is this, again, those things tend to harm you as well. That's the only challenge that I have with it. When you rise above that, again, you learn a strength in you that you never even knew that you had.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and in prison, it can be more dangerous than when you're on the street, and sometimes not more dangerous, because it can be as dangerous in the streets for people to believe somehow that, you know, that you're going to allow them to get away with doing whatever. I had a situation in my office where the lady kind of moved her hand and she popped me in my chest. And because I didn't move, then she started going real big and really, you know, going off and screaming and yelling and that kind of thing, because she thought I was afraid. What she didn't realize was I had a case that was hanging over me, that if I got in trouble for 3 years, they would bring this case back. And it took everything in me not to respond at that time, but it was in my best interest. And it was crazy because, similar to your circumstances, Willie, was at the end of the day, she was in there arguing with me about a boyfriend that she had that didn't have any business in the building. And I promise you, in less than 2 to 3 weeks later, they were calling because that same boyfriend was in her apartment throwing all of her clothes and belongings and everything off the balcony out into the middle of the street. So there's that whole thing of karma. Karma is something, it's a dish best served cold. But when you retaliate against somebody, no matter how wrong they were for you in the beginning, now you have generated karma for yourself. Now it's some stuff you got to pay for in the future. I wanted to tell this story about a colleague of mine who works with all kinds of populations. And she was, at this point, this was a re-entry population, and she was dealing with them in counseling and all kinds of things. And she walked to this facility today, this particular day, and she wasn't feeling her best. She was going through a lot of things. And one of her clients must have perceived that something was wrong, that she wasn't her normal happy self. So he asks her, "How you doing today?" And she says, she started to just say her usual, "I'm fine," but something told her to say, "Today is not a good day for me." And what that opened the door for her was he began that day to tell her all kinds of encouraging things. Long story short, to make it brief, is that he began to comfort and love on her verbally, okay, and give her the pick me up that she needed that day to move on. And so I wanted to tell the story because it was so impactful to me at the time that I was teaching in CIW, and I went in and I talked to them about it that following week. Why? Because what happens oftentimes is that we will say, "Oh, I'm okay." We don't want anybody to know that we're going through something, or we think that by telling them we may appear weak, when in reality, what we need a lot of times is just somebody to understand and somebody to care. And so when if I come into a room and I'm like this, and y'all know I'm normally happy-go-lucky, but I'm like this, and I'm not talking, I'm not laughing, you're going to know something's different about me.
Yeah, if you talking, I know something.
Shut up, child. And if you okay, y'all, we ain't into violence, but here we go. So if I say that and you ask me, "How are you?" or "How is everything?" and I say it's okay, you know, number one, that it's not okay. You could tell that it's not okay. So you come to the conclusion, one, she either doesn't want to talk about it, or she's just lying because she doesn't want me to know what's going on. Either way, I cut you off from giving me positive reinforcement, positive input, and those things that will help me to grow and help me to feel better on that particular day. So what we do when we cut ourselves off from the fear of opening ourselves up physically or being physically or emotionally wounded, this is usually why we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable. In relationships, men and women often put up a wall because they don't want to be emotionally or physically wounded by the other person. Well, what happens is you don't run the risk of being wounded, but you also, I put it to you this way, when you cut off pain, you also cut off pleasure. They're the opposite side of the same coin. And when you reject one, you reject the other. So when you cut off the opportunity to be physically or emotionally wounded, you also cut off the opportunity to be physically or emotionally satisfied, helped, loved on, cared for, and caressed. Okay. And so I wanted to bring that to everybody's attention because we tend to cut ourselves off. And whether it's in relationships, and particularly I thought it was an interesting topic for our group, because all of you all knows what it's like to feel vulnerable. I mean, anybody that's been to the penitentiary had their first day incarcerated. And I can't even imagine that that is not a day that you felt vulnerable. That first day incarcerated, because you didn't even know what was going on.
I felt vulnerable the whole time.
Say that again.
I felt vulnerable from the substation on when the police were chasing me, because I was chased by Firestone. So Firestone called me. They gave me boot therapy from the point where we ran into the lady's house with the car, because we was in a high-speed chase. We went into this lady's living room. They came in the living room, snatched me and my crimey out, and stomped us for 20 minutes before they could put me in the ambulance and him in the back seat of the car. The vulnerability is a moment where nobody likes to admit, and that's that moment when you first walk in, your first time ever walking in the county jail, and you don't know what's going on, and you better not touch that John Wayne wall, or you better not look at John Wayne, or you got scraped, or you seen that dude jumped on by 45 guys getting disciplined and you didn't understand what discipline was. Those are the times when you felt you're most vulnerable that nobody wants to admit. The other vulnerability time is when you first got out of prison. That's another vulnerability that you felt, that I felt when I got out of prison. I wasn't ready for society. I thought I was, because everybody talked to me and told me what they felt like when they paroled, but it's never the same. Everybody's circumstance is different when they come out of parole. So when they parole from prison. So the vulnerability is the things of that, and the relationships with your family, not a relationship with your woman, because we talk to her on the phone all the time. But the vulnerability of family that hardly ever wrote, that hardly ever sent a message, but as soon as you got out, they come up and want to hug on you. That's the first thing they want to do. Old cousin or old brother or old sister, glad to see you home, and you don't know this person. How many kids then came up that you didn't even know? That's a vulnerability.
And they have the ability to wound you emotionally. And that is what we don't want. And one of the things, another reason I wanted to have this conversation with this group is at the Francisco homes years ago, a guy was talking about in our group, we were out on the porch, and he was saying that he had not used his EBT. And he hadn't used it because when he was a kid and they were on welfare, he was embarrassed. And he used to hate it when he was on welfare. You had to tear the tickets and, tear him out the book and get the right amounts and so on and so forth. And it took a long time, and people, he felt embarrassed. Well, he had a couple of months worth of food stamps and stuff on his card, and he said he didn't know how to use it, and he was afraid. He didn't want to. He was embarrassed, and he didn't want people behind him in line, getting irritated with it. Well, as it turned out, because he was brave enough in that moment to be vulnerable and to take a chance on being attacked or ridiculed or any of those things, which would wound him emotionally, somebody said, "Oh man, don't even worry about it. The next time you go, I'll take you and I'll show you how to do it." As a result of that, 2 or 3 other guys said, "I haven't used mine either," for the same reason. So by him being willing to be vulnerable and expose what he was afraid of, he opened it up for other people to be helped. My point for this conversation is this: particularly when you come home, there are so many things that you're going to need. And the thing you have to be willing to do is ask for help. Make yourself vulnerable enough to ask for help. The one thing that I love about the Francisco homes is that the men will help each other. The people in the house will help each other. They're not going to do everything for you, which I actually love also, because at some point you got to know how to do it yourself, right? You need to know how to get around. You need to know how to do all those things, but they will help you. They will assist you. And that is what people need. But you got to be willing to make yourself vulnerable enough for somebody to help you. Nobody can read your mind and know your needs if you don't make those needs known. And the only way to do that is to expose what you don't know. That's another reason why people don't do it. They don't want people to know what they don't know. They don't want people to ridicule them. They don't want people. So you got to be willing to open up yourself and explain those things, your needs, so that somebody can help you. Okay. I want to give everybody an opportunity. Mr. Kane, comments, thoughts?
I think there's many different types of vulnerability, right, that we discussed. There was the physical vulnerability, there's emotional vulnerability, intellectual vulnerability, right, financial vulnerability. So we're talking about so many different facets of vulnerability. And the thing is coming out of prison, we really have to open ourselves up for almost every single one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like last week I got hit by a car walking the street. So
Right,
that's
that's
my
right. We're
physical.
trying to make sure you stay out the street. That's right. We did have that, didn't we?
Yeah. So that's the physical vulnerability, right?
I'll
Yeah,
say.
and then, and then especially like yesterday I had a talk with my ex-wife,
Mhm.
right? And throughout my incarceration, I was very guarded emotionally. So, vulnerability has a lot to do with guarding yourself, protecting yourself, right? So when I finally talked to her face to face, I removed all those and I just laid it on the line and I said, this is how I felt and this is how I feel about you and the ball's in your court, and that's something that, I never did before, so now coming out here, I've only been out like less than 2 weeks,
Mhm.
but I have to apply the things that I learned inside, because if I don't, what was the whole use of even learning them in the first place, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's why I realize now, like, well, being the tough guy and doing all that, well, what did it lead me? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
whole lot of years
So
behind bars.
exactly. So
And
now,
cut off emotionally, physically, financially, and all of those things from all the people that you love, and created
exactly.
that. But one of the things you said that I think that's really important is the reason that we use for not expressing or becoming vulnerable is the protection of ourselves. We want to protect ourselves, but the cold part about that is that people will gather around you and help you protect yourself if you're willing to be vulnerable. Thinking about Mr. Steffen's case, right? Literally, his guys were around him, but guess what? They were willing to come around him and protect him, but then also the system, which don't never protect nobody, ultimately protected him as it went forward. So that is usually the reason that we don't. It's the walls we put up, and those same walls again is a two-edged sword, right? The flip side of the same coin. You can't cut off pain without cutting off pleasure, right? You can't be protected if you're not willing to willing to let somebody know you need some protection. So I'm very impressed with your understanding in these 2 weeks that you've been home and been a part of this group. I really appreciate your openness and the things that you have said in these 2 weeks. And I'm really glad that you're with us. And I'm sure you're going to be successful at reentry. I'm positive about it. And I thank you for your
Thank
comment.
you.
Mr. Charles,
Thank you.
can I ask you to comment?
On vulnerability, it's something that we all deal with, but it's something that each person has to manufacture a remedy for themselves. All of us at their time have been in certain situations that we had to use courage. And courage was a word that um, I've encountered it many times, and I made a issue of remembering what it actually entails. And courage entails the ability to face danger without fear. And that's rather hard when you confront it with something that you can't get away from. However, in looking at the bigger picture, you realize that you have to be bigger than the other person who has you confronting a situation that you don't necessarily like, and you don't want to deal with it. What I've told myself in my confrontations is I'm more afraid of myself than I am the other person.
Right.
Because I don't look at half measures. You either do it or you don't.
Understood.
And you know, I mean, when I say I do it, I'm going to the max, to the absolute max, so that there is no repercussion, no get back, no nothing. You saying goodbye. So the ability to open yourself to being vulnerable is an act of courage.
Yes, it
The
is.
ability to face danger without fear. And the only way that I got around it was, like I said, looking at the bigger picture and taking the responsibility on myself that I'm more afraid of myself and what I'll do, which, you know, basically that what I'll do will X me out too.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It X me, it's going, I mean, you gone, but I'm gone too.
Right.
So
and so what good was that, right?
Is that what I want? You know,
Yeah.
what does that solve, you know? Yeah, my ego, you know, is pumped up and I probably ain't gonna have no more problems, but the point is I done X myself out.
Right. You won't have no problem with that person, but you got much bigger problems now. Now you got a whole
Yeah,
other issue, right? So
yeah,
it's
I
like
got a
you
whole life
won the
to
battle, but
live.
you lost the war.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
And I just
exactly.
want to say one thing that on something that you said. I want to tweak just one. You said the act of courage is
Ability to face
responding
danger.
without fear, right?
Yeah,
I want to say even in the face of it.
yeah,
Right. So responding even in the face of fear, right? Fear of a whole bunch of things, moving forward anyway. And I really appreciate your input on this topic. And it's funny because as you began to talk about it, and I'm looking at you and I'm thinking to myself, this ain't a person that like to be vulnerable, like the concept of
no,
like,
no.
ooh, like even just trying to talk about it, like I could feel your body language, like, man, that ain't something I do.
No. Hey, God made man and Winchester made them equal.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I think, look, I don't know. I think on that one, okay? Mr.
Smith and
Jones,
Western then.
thank you again, Charles. Mr. Jones.
For me, vulnerable. This is a good topic because you know I'm a small person, and when I went to prison and got locked up, I was even smaller. So I felt vulnerable, like you said, when you walking in that first substation. You know what I mean? And then not knowing, you know, what to expect when you get to the county jail and and in prison and all that. So for me, vulnerable, being vulnerable wasn't a good thing. It was dangerous to me. I felt when I felt vulnerable, I felt like my life was kind of like on the line. You know what I mean? So it was a feeling. It was a dangerous feeling for me. So I had to step up to that fear and overcome that fear with violence, though, and which is not a good thing. But um, that's what vulnerability was for me before. But now I welcome it. I welcome it because it's to me it's just not knowing, and I'm okay with not knowing because I'm okay with asking, you know, um, asking for help, like you said, Noreen. So, um, um, yeah, just that's how I see vulnerability now. I'm confident enough in myself to ask the question, and to accept the fact that I don't know. So
That's
I'm
so good.
okay.
That's powerful.
Yeah, I'm okay with being vulnerable right now.
And
So
I'm glad because what it does is it also opens you up to assistance, to being loved on, to
right,
being cared for, to being shown
right,
a different way, which are things again that when you cut off one, you cut off the other. So these are ways that you can benefit from it at this point and use it to your advantage. Now, I will say this: one of the things I've learned is to exercise some wisdom with who I'm
right,
vulnerable with and in front of and around, right?
right,
Because you
right,
got to learn. I mean, everybody ain't your friend, and everybody don't mean us no good, and
Mhm.
that's the truth. And those people still exist, but at the same time, selectively choosing who you are vulnerable around, it is important. But the other side of it is too, even if you expose yourself to that person once, don't mean you have to keep doing it if you find out they're
exactly,
worthy.
exactly. That's what I like about what you just said, because sometimes you don't have control over the situation of being vulnerable. Because I'm like
Oh, your phone muted. It muted.
my phone started ringing. So
Okay, okay. I can hear you
yeah,
now.
so I'm vulnerable. I mean, I'm confident enough in myself now to say, no matter what the situation is, I can walk away from that one, or I can speak to that one and be like, okay, that's fine. That's whatever you think about that. I'm okay with that, and
Yeah.
be okay with it. So, but like you said, I'm not going to be vulnerable to that one again.
Right,
So,
right.
right. So
Yeah,
I get it, and I like that. Thank you.
that's awesome. Thank you. Oscar, can you unmute for me? Wait a minute. Unmute for me, Oscar. Try it again.
Right now?
Oh, there you go.
Good. All right. Now let me share you a vulnerable. I don't know how to pronounce very well that word, but we always are vulnerable because when I wasn't myself, I was blessing. Like I always have a lot of food. Every time I have a sales, I would like to share my food with them. Sometimes they take advantage. For example, they go to a store or canteen. I was happy every time they go to canteen, but next day they don't have no food because they spend their money, their food with drugs or a lot of stuff. And they always asking me, oh, can I borrow the soup? Can I borrow chocolate? Can I have this one, that one? I always share with them, but they never pay me back. And when I was so tired, I told them, hey, you know what? I don't like you told me you pay me, you never pay me. It's a lot of problem. That's one situation. Another situation when I used to play sport, I used to play baseball and soccer. Every time another team lose, if they don't know how to play. When you know how to play sport, they're really mad. They attack to you. And sometimes we don't want no problem. You know, I don't respond back. They take advantage when you respond back. That's you always in prison are vulnerable no matter what. Right now I feel vulnerable because if somebody attack to you, nothing you can do because they go to arrest you no matter what. You know, that's my opinion right now.
Yeah, and somebody had mentioned one time when we were talking, and I think it might have been you, James, was saying you were more, and somebody was talking about they were more concerned about the people outside, like just because it's a different thing. So there's vulnerability everywhere, but again, I wanted to balance the conversation and let you know that sometimes being willing to expose that vulnerability more often than not is going to help you as opposed to hinder you, as long as you couch it with some wisdom. And it's not just with everybody. I'm going to go to Lionel and then I'm going to come to you, okay? Go ahead, Lionel. If you can, any final thoughts for you about the topic?
Yeah, you talking to me?
No, thank you, Oscar. For Lionel. Okay. Kit, what about you?
Okay, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. Vulnerability is just, to me, even in times of trouble, even when things are going bad, I take everything now to God and I put it on God's feet.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been praising God even when things are going bad for me. And now I've been rewarded. God has truly shown me his ultimate power. And I know for a fact that God is a miracle worker. And don't let nobody tell you he ain't. Take your problems to God because he can handle it.
I love that.
Okay.
And for some people, they don't understand that, and I don't care what you call it, how you do it, you got to understand there's something higher than you out here. You got to understand that there's a power that operates the universe that's bigger than you. And I'm going to prove it to you right now. I need somebody on here to tell me how many times you blinked your eyes today.
Ha ha ha.
Power
Yeah.
higher than you did that. I'll wait. Mr. Bradley, can you unmute now and talk to me? Final comments?
Yep, so I can. Vulnerability to me is something like Charles said. I'm not going to allow myself to become vulnerable for anyone because simple fact, like the other gentleman said about going to prison, going to jail, couldn't be vulnerable because either someone's going to take advantage of that. A lot of people will take advantage. Even the police would take advantage. We always had to have our guard up because the consequences, the things we face. Why I was in the county jail. And then it's like, it's trauma for me. It's trauma to leave myself vulnerable. So I always got to be on guard. But I will ask for help because I'm not ashamed. I don't have that low self-esteem no more to ask for help. So to me, vulnerability and low self-esteem goes into play with that right there. It's like, I'm comfortable in myself, but I'm not going to allow myself to be vulnerable. I had to build trust. Someone had to build trust with me. Then I could allow myself to be vulnerable once we establish trust with one another. But everybody don't get that trust, It's like something that's got over time got revealed. I got another question for you, Marie. I got one more question for you.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to bring them papers to you, and I see the 4th of July is Tuesday, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, huh?
And I want to know if you're going to be, huh?
No, we won't be doing it 4th of July, boo. Hopefully.
Okay, so go ahead.
If all goes well, by 6 o'clock on Tuesday, I'll be a little tipsy somewhere, full with my feet kicked up, eating some good food, tipsy. Okay. If I have it my way, I'm glad because it didn't even occur to me. But yes, Tuesday we won't be having group.
Okay, so the next week I'll be bringing it to you. I'll be getting some copies made and bring it to you so you can share with everyone here.
Awesome, and I'm going to come to you, James, next. But what I want to say is, I want us to remember this: that when you have built up the walls to not be vulnerable while you were in prison, when you come home, those same walls become an obstacle to healthy relationships on the outside. Because people have to be able to get behind that. You have to be able to be vulnerable in relationships for them to be healthy. You have to be willing to expose who you really are. And what happens is while you're trying to protect yourself, from being hurt emotionally, the person on the other side can feel it, even if they don't understand or know what it is. We feel it, okay? And it becomes an obstacle for us. And so now everybody's playing this game. We trying to judge when we can and when we can't expose our feelings, and when we can and can't. And what happens is it's always hit and miss. So just keep that in mind. James, you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to say to the brothers that vulnerability is a teaching moment. Vulnerability is a moment of understanding. And the reason why I say that is because these groups help me. I deal with anxiety real bad. And being vulnerable with women, my family, and friends was real hard for me. And like Noreen said, it was a big wall. I didn't want to let nobody over that wall. I didn't want to let nobody through that door. I used to gauge how far I let you come to the door, you know, to the point to where it hindered me in a lot of things. But then when I became open and vulnerable, especially in this group, it opened me to a lot of things and different aspects of knowledge and growth and who I am as a person. Like when we start taking them groups serious in prison and start working on ourselves before we came home, now comes the foothold. People gonna ask you, why do you still go to that group? I'm off parole. I've been on parole for a couple of years, but this is the best thing that ever happened to me is this group. So I tell people, the vulnerability can be a big hindrance for us, but the vulnerability can also be the big growth moment, the aha moments that we say when we're in the groups. Those are those moments of aha, you know, like what I tell everybody, my first thing was take my shoes off and put my feet in grass. You know, in prison, how many years we walked around. I mean, when you got up in the morning, you had your boots on before they unlocked the thing on the door or before anybody else wake up in the dorms. Now, you know, here we are at the beach. We the only ones out there with some sweat socks on and boots walking across the sand. That's awkward to the people on the street. They don't understand that. But we do. I understand that. If I see it, I know he just got out to pee, you know? So the vulnerability to open up and find that one person that you can trust, that you can actually communicate with about some of your vulnerabilities is gonna be your next step to your growth in society.
And you know, one of the things about that is that the more you open yourself and the more avenues that you give yourself to trust people and those kinds of things, the more opportunities for growth that you have. Ms. Ward, comments on our topic this evening?
I wasn't vulnerable because I used to fight in county jail and stuff. So I got to prison.
It's all right.
I had to fight. No, I didn't fight. I know how to talk with. I know how to talk. And I can say what I got to say without cussing. But again, I say welcome home to all of you who come.
Thank you. Ma'am?
I think vulnerability is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And that you should embrace yourself.
Wonderful. Sir? Wake up over here.
I'm awake.
Any final comments?
Yeah. It took me like 3 years of going to Noreen's class for her to open my heart and say it's easy to love than hate. And I'm blessed. There ain't no other word for it. Without her, I'd still probably be a bigger asshole than I am now.
And that takes a lot.
Yes.
Terrell, any last comments from you, love?
Oh, I just want to say, vulnerability is up to the individual in the situation. And everybody have their time to be vulnerable wherever they feel it's more comfortable for them, you know, because, hey, it might be with a woman, it might be with one of your family members, it might be with a stranger, it might be in a group, you know, it just all depends on the individual and where you feel that it might just hit you one day. You might just get emotional in a group or something, or you might be with somebody that you've been with and you feel like you get vulnerable. But I just tell people, just make sure you ain't vulnerable to the wrong people. You know what I mean? Because the wrong people will take advantage of your ass and use your vulnerability, and it'll be probably you'll feel more worse than you did when you opened up and being vulnerable. So be strong. Be strong. You know what I mean? Because vulnerability ain't it's not a weakness. It's actually a strength, but it's a part of where and who you share your vulnerability with.
Well, and that's the wisdom I was talking about, Terrell, that you got to exercise. You got to exercise some wisdom with it. It's not a toy. And it's not willy-nilly, just whoever will, you just open that up and offer it to anybody that you come in contact with. That's not wise. So I just want to say that, again, I have found for myself when I open myself up and I just say what I need and I express that I need help, that I get that help and that it has actually caused me to be able to move forward. And I appreciate all of you all because being in prison creates and often necessitates that wall and that wall of protection. And so just understanding it or even being willing to have this conversation with us tonight is huge. And I appreciate you. And I'm hoping that anybody out there, listen, this is Free to Heal. We're trying to get over the ravages of incarceration. If you're a loved one, understand that the people that you love that came home from prison, they may have a problem being emotionally open and those kinds of things because they came out of a circumstance that in order to protect themselves and possibly survive, they had to put up those walls. So just know, again, we're trying to help everybody understand each other so that ultimately families can stay together and communities can be strong, because that is the family structure is what has been torn down, and people have been programmed to war against each other for no reason. And so I'm just grateful that we've had this conversation. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of those things. Did you want to say something else? YouTube, obviously, hopefully leave us comments. If there are topics that you want us to discuss, please, by all means, put them in the comments and we'll get back to you, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
And I still want to check.
And listen, ain't nobody giving him no checks, okay? He better get him a job. Okay.